everyone, welcome to my channel. This is Nat from Nat's Narrative, and today I'm going to be attempting to finish my fall TBR. I actually started this channel 2 months ago by the time that I post this, and my first video was me finishing my summer TBR, so it seems quite fitting that this video is basically the same thing, just during the fall. There's 2 books that I absolutely can't not read before fall ends. I know technically fall doesn't end until the 21st of December, but December is just Christmas time. And even though I'm not a huge fan of Christmassy or holiday books, especially romance ones, I'm still gonna read a couple. Just because, you know, it's a season. So these are the 2 books that I'm going to be reading in this vlog. I actually already started A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. Because it usually takes me quite a while to get through a physical book, I decided to listen to the audiobook for this and then take a few notes on my phone and annotate it at a later date. As for The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston, I am going to be reading this physical copy and I am going to annotate it. If you watched my reading blog that I mentioned, the Finishing My Summer TBR reading blog, I read A Novel Love Story by the same author and I annotated that book heavily. However, finishing A Novel Love Story took me 2 months and I don't have that time. So I'm hoping I'm going to be able to read this in a couple of sittings. I'm going to put a lot of mental effort and clear my schedule, and I'm just going to sit down and read for as long as possible until I manage to finish it. Okay, like I said, I already started the audiobook for A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I started to listen to that on Wednesday night. Today is Saturday night, so I'm quite a bit into the book. I would say I'm about 60-something%. I've been taking notes on my phone and I expected to take a few notes here and there, but because it is a murder mystery and I'm super into true crime, I've been making guesses or theories and typing it all into my phone. So I have quite a few annotations that I need to make before I continue to listen to the audiobook. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking now so that we can get started with the vlog, and I will catch up with you guys in a second. Okay, it is time for an update on A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I am on chapter 31, which means I'm about 69% into the audiobook, and I have to say that so far I am pleasantly surprised. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I've had that book for years now, and when I first got it, I was really interested into reading the book, but the more time passed, the less interest I had. So my expectations were to enjoy the book, be entertained, but I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I'm liking it so far. It is very entertaining. So much is happening. It's quite fast paced. I do have to say that I'm really liking Pipa's character. She is very relatable to me in many ways. As for the plot, I like it. I do find it, I don't want to say that it's predictable yet because I haven't finished the book, so maybe the predictions that I've been making are completely wrong. Here's the thing about my predictions. I feel like there's two possible outcomes. One of them feels overdone, and I do think Holly Jackson wants you to think it's going that way, but then she's going to completely blow your mind with this other ending. The other ending, I've predicted it already. I feel like I shouldn't even be talking about this because I haven't finished the book. However, if the ending that I'm thinking of actually happens, then I predicted it from the first or the second chapter. So that would be kind of lame. However, it's not the most obvious ending, right? So I would have to applaud her because of that. The problem is that I watched too much true crime, and from that second chapter I was like, wait, something doesn't add up. That prediction came from the fact that Sal, when they find his body, he has her DNA, so he has her blood underneath his nails 4 days after he allegedly killed her. You would think he would have washed his hands many times in that period of time, right? But what if it was fresh? What if the blood underneath his nails was fresh? That's all I will say, just in case my prediction is wrong. But yeah, I'm very excited to continue to listen. I haven't listened in a few days because I wanted to start annotating and I wanted to give you guys an update. So now that I have, I can finally finish. I mean, I don't think I'll finish the last 30% tonight, but I will get on that immediately right after I finish this. I'm going to leave you guys for now, go do that, and then I'll come back for another update. Hello everyone, it has been quite a few days since the last update, but I finally finished The Dead Romantics. It did take me a little longer than I had anticipated, but I finished it within a week, so it wasn't really that long. Anyway, I finished both books off screen, so now it's time to give you my final thoughts. Let's start with A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I actually liked this book way more than I had anticipated. I expected it to be a little silly YA murder mystery, and it was so much more than that. I had an idea of how I thought the book was going to end, and for a second we went there, and then it didn't happen. So if you haven't read the book or watched the TV show, I am going to give some spoilers, right? I'll put like on the chapters so you can skip it. But I was so sure from chapter number 2 that Andy was alive and that she somehow had something to do with Saul's death, right? One of my first thoughts was that his way of committing suicide did not look like a suicide at all. So one of my theories was that he had her blood underneath his nails 4 days later because he was scratching her when she put the bag over his head. So she drugged him with the sleeping pills, and as he's falling asleep and losing consciousness, she puts the bag over his head. He still has enough presence of mind to understand what is happening, and so he fights back a little bit, scratches her. That's how he gets the DNA. That was not what happened. I did suspect of Mr. Ward very early on, and then when she talks to him and she's like, okay, he's not a suspect anymore, I was still suspecting him as my number one guy for secret older guy. He was like my number one suspect. I do think Holly Jackson did a really good job of like misleading the reader into giving more attention to Daniel or Howie or even Max for a potential secret older guy, but I always stayed with one eye on Mr. Ward until it turned out that it was him. For a second I thought, oh okay, so I was half right. She is alive, but she's been kidnapped and held hostage all this time. And then boom, it's not the real Andy. It's just some poor girl who was walking around that kind of looked like her. As much as I love the book, I do want to say that for most of the time, like 97% of the time, I was one step or two steps ahead of people. Like whenever she was gonna find something out, whenever she discovered a new piece of evidence, whenever something big happened in the plot, I saw it coming like a page beforehand or like paragraphs beforehand. So by the time that it happened, I was like, ha, I was right. But I wasn't that surprised most of the book, but not all of it. So yeah, that was the reason I didn't give 5 stars, because for the most part I saw things coming right before they happened, like right before. But still, it was a really good story, very eventful. We went so many ways, and I had originally planned to only read the first book because I already had it, and I just wanted to move it from my TBR cart to my bookshelf. But now that I've read it or listened to the audiobook, I do think I want to read the rest of the series at a later date, or even other Holly Jackson books. The Dead Romantics. I knew that Ashley Poston would not disappoint me. I've only read her third book, A Novel Love Story, but still I knew that I would love this, and I did. After reading 2 of her books, I've come to expect her writing style to be incredibly funny and relatable, but not super in your face. Like, she's not trying to be funny or relatable, she just is, if that makes any sense. The way she writes childhood memories is the best I've come across. Like, she captures the little moments in your life that may seem insignificant when they're happening, but they paint a picture of, you know, childhood or adolescence that I don't think many writers are able to like do it the same way that she can. The premise, so good. This is basically a girl who can see ghosts, and she has been running away from that gift her whole life until her father passes away, and she has to come back home for the first time, like I said, in 10 years, and help to organize his funeral, while the rest of her family continues to go as they usually do, holding funerals for other people at their funeral home. By the way, she's a ghostwriter for a very famous romance writer. She's passed her deadline for the last book in her contract, and her new and very hot editor tells her that, yeah, no, she has to turn it in the next day. She doesn't. She goes back home to the funeral. So She gets home, they're reading the will. Her dad makes the most eccentric request for his funeral, and that's when somebody knocks on the door of the funeral home. She goes to answer, and the ghost of her very hot editor is there, and he has no idea that he's dead, and now she has to figure out how to help him move on to the afterlife while grieving for her dad and organizing a very, very eccentric funeral. One thing that this book and a novel love story have in common is that the main character is I don't want to say recovering from a breakup, because they don't seem to be recovering at all. They seem to be pretty much stuck, you know, on the table, right where you left me, if you get the reference to Taylor Swift. Yeah, but they seem to be holding on to their pain and refusing to move on. Usually when a romance author writes about the main character going through a really tough breakup at the beginning of the book, right before they find the love of their life, it's usually in a bad way. Like, we usually see the end of the breakup, the horrible, angry, sad moments. But Ashley Poston actually gives you the entire lifespan of the romance between the main character and her ex. From the very beginning, from the meet cute and the falling in love and all the beautiful moments in the middle, and then she gives you the heartbreak and the ending of that relationship that she had before the book started. And the way that she does that is so heartbreaking. It's somehow some of the most impactful moments in the books, even though it's not the main romance. Another thing that I absolutely loved was the way that she writes about grief, about losing somebody close to you, about not being able to say goodbye, about the fact that you are miles away when that person sadly dies. The days afterwards, the going through the motions, the funeral, the having to live on without them. She writes about that so beautifully, and yeah, so many of the things that she was talking about of her dad reminded me of losing my grandma, and I think it was very beautiful and very accurate. I'm gonna be paraphrasing, but at one point she mentions how when writers write about grief, they mention is like this hollowness, but it's the opposite. It's like you're full with it, you're full of grief, like it's inside you and it's consuming you. I thought that was a really good way to explain it. You're not empty, you are full of grief. But yeah, that was The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. I feel like I say this in every single outro, but it's true. I had such a lovely time filming this video, and I had an amazing time reading the books, or at least listening to the audiobook for A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I had a really good time annotating that. I haven't finished annotating it or like transferring the notes that I have on my phone to the physical copy, but I will. And I had a really good time reading my physical copy of The Dead Romantics. I'm also on Bookstagram as Nat's Narrative, so the link is going to be down below if you want to follow me. I'm also going to leave the links to my threads and my Goodreads. But yeah, that's going to be it for today's video. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe so that I know that you enjoy the content, and I will see you guys for the next one. Bye!